p.m. And we're in there for the reasons that are stated on the agenda. Some announcements. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable and TV and re-recorded and rebroadcast on local cable channels and on the internet. The internet is on YouTube. It generally gets brought up around 1 or 2 in the morning tomorrow morning. Bicentennial Committee is buying a block of tickets for the Red Sox Day at Fenway Park. Red Sox, it will be a Red Sox Day. It will be West Newbury Red Sox Day. Interested, please contact the committee via email at wnbirthday@wnewbury.org. West Newbury Birthday Party. And birthday cake contest is February 24th, which is this Sunday from 2 to 6 at Pawtucket Middle School. I hear, I don't know if you can still enter the cake contest, but I think we had 48 entries so far. And I am a judge, so I can be bought out if you do bring ice cream along with the cake, because I do like ice cream with my cake. We are still looking for 2019 volunteer opportunities and for committee openings and online. You can find those or call Mary at the Selectmen's office, and you can do that at www.wnewbury.org and see the committee openings that we presently have. Did you want to say anything, Joe?
I just wanted to wish the town of West Newbury a happy birthday. We were 200 years old yesterday, so first incorporated February 18th, 1819.
It only feels like 250 to me. Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Angus?
I'm just going to put in an extra plug for the party next Sunday. Signing a AP warrant recently. I saw the invoice, and there's juggler. There's they make the balloon animals. There's all kinds of entertainment. There's a DJ with music. There's a laser show. It really is going to be a terrific party. It's free of charge next Sunday, so I'd encourage everybody with or without families to come. I think it's going to be great. And also, I wanted to just mention we've got this event coming up. I don't know, Glenn, do you want to? So this is a panel discussion on the Pawtucket School Building project. That's going to be Monday, March 11th at 9 a.m. That's hosted by the Council on Aging. And myself, Archie, Superintendent Bartholomew, and Crystal. There you go. Will be participating, and they're having similar panel discussions in each of the Pawtucket towns. And so I'd encourage anyone interested to either attend this one or look for other dates. There will be a lot of these kinds of events in the months leading up to town meeting.
You want to talk about that now?
Sure.
So I think also, that's at 9 in the morning. So us working people are at work then. What we found really productive when we were early on in the town manager process was having open forums in this room, and it was
On Saturdays.
it was on a Saturday. It was a part presentation, but it was more of a give and take where people could ask questions that what was on their mind, and a number of people that came that were dead set against the idea left 100% for it. So that might be something, not might be, I think that's something we should consider. And just to throw out, I mean, I would think like late March might be a good time. I don't know if you want to look at a couple of dates that we could propose to Justin. I mean, I would see him being more all of us, but him, the primary person doing the speaking. I mean, I think we should all be together.
I did speak with him about that. He's very interested in scheduling a couple of things in each of the towns, which we would promote and try to help get the word out.
So he wants to do a couple?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've asked him to give us some dates that would work, and then...
This one on the 11th, I think, is more Council on Aging.
It is.
Yeah.
That's right, yep.
So let's just to throw something out. maybe March 23rd as the initial one, and then maybe in April. I don't know what April would be, but I mean, that seems to, just to throw something out.
All needs to
Okay.
be before April 26th.
Huh?
Needs to be before town meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't want it in April where, on, school vacation week. Bill? Yeah. Can you make sure the microphone's on, please? You have to hit the small button underneath. Underneath. Just push it in.
Push it until you get a green.
Green.
Push it in and let it go. Yeah, there it goes.
Yeah, so Angus, my question is, how does those meetings differ from or are they similar or different than the meetings that were held at Switzer?
That was more of a somewhat more formal meeting, where that was a joint meeting of the 3 towns boards of selectmen as well as the school committee. So it was kind of, organized with a presentation and so forth. I think this would be, I would think the presentation would be a lot shorter and it would be more interactive, as Joe said, to get input. It would be maybe somewhat less formal. And there wouldn't be all these public officials at the front of the room, which can be, daunting to some people. So.
I don't think there'll be any new information. We're gonna go over an update tonight that some information has changed. The numbers have come down, the numbers have solidified a little bit more. But
Answer people's questions.
yeah, see, nothing much different, but I think maybe it's like a little bit less formal, so people feel like they can voice their concerns or have their questions answered. Anything else? Mary, you have anything? Okay, if not, let's get this started tonight. Street opening permits. Take it that if it makes it to us that all the questions have been done. I see that the DPW does have some requirements and they're all attached.
I move to approve the street opening permits for 1214 and 16 Dole Place with the stipulations as outlined in the permit.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion or concerns? If none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next thing on the agenda tonight is continued review of the open space and recreation plan, the open space committee. Anybody here? Yeah. Come on up.
Oh, really?
Well, somebody kind of needs to.
Say something.
Yeah. You can keep that. I don't know why that didn't stay on.
Oh, I turned it off.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You can serve, saving the world one battery at a time. How do I go? Okay, so somebody had to come up. Sorry.
Right, no problem.
You drew the short end.
So this is just a follow-up to, you received the red line
Yep.
version?
Yep.
We incorporated all changes or addressed all questions that were made by the various committees
Mm-hmm.
and just wanted to document for you that those changes have been made.
Good. Did Joe, you had some questions or I don't know, questions or?
That was last time.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make sure they were answered, and if you wanted to talk about it anymore or anything like that.
No, I mean, I'd just like to hear, since the recreation commissioner is here, if what his thoughts are on it. But other than that, I'm fine.
Okay, you can use that one up there, or you can.
No, I just thought, no, I mean, it's fine. Joe, thank you. I have no issues. We reviewed it already. Provided feedback. Did you have anything in particular?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I was
think
just,
our concern was that we wanted to make sure that you were involved. It didn't
I
seem
was.
like
Initially.
Well,
that there was given not out of malice or something. You guys weren't trying to keep them out of it. But it's some, I think, right, would be the proper.
Yeah.
So just wanted to make sure you guys.
no, I think what happened is the disconnect is that the initial report that Molly was working on and that I had given input to sort of changed. And I wasn't aware of, I didn't realize it had changed. And then once we got back together again, we're in good shape. We feel we're unified, I guess. Is that a good word? There you go. All right.
good.
That's what we like to hear.
I'd just like to say thank you for all the hard work. You obviously put a lot of time into it. I like the changes, so I'm good.
Perfect. And when does this need to be done again?
2 years ago. Yeah, it's
10 years ago?
2 years ago. So we have all the letters we need except for the Board of Selectmen letter.
So, yeah, is this, what I have in front of me, is this how the?
That's a draft letter subject to your action or modification.
Have you seen this draft letter?
No,
You just wanna make sure it's adequate for, filing, I guess you need something from us,
we
correct?
just have to document
Yeah.
proof that the boards that are required have.
You wanna, there's some thank yous in there too, to specific people, I'm not sure if it's, but that's what we have. And I don't think any of us have any problems with it. Good? Okay, so someone with motion, please?
Move to approve the letter,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to move it over there. We printed the whole side, I just wanna make sure there wasn't.
Wendy, we've got an original they'll sign tonight where you can take that one.
Oh, okay. And get your own style, get nothing done.
I move to approve the letter of the open space and recreation plan.
Second. Move in second, actually, any questions or anything?
Nope, good. Aye.
Can you just not take that away until we get a copy for our files, please?
Yep.
Thank you, Okay, and so the next thing we have tonight is the River Edge, correspondence from the Open Space Committee for proposed trail at the River Edge development. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this, I'm not sure if you were involved in when this was approved by the planning board, so this is just a heads up to tell you that the process of permitting the trails has been started, or is ready to start. Just wanted to give you the opportunity to express any concerns or questions before we move forward.
You want to start?
Go ahead.
Okay, number 4, the town will be granted an easement to the trails through conservation and will assume responsibility for maintenance of them. Can you tell me what that means? Because I'm not too happy with the trails that the other contractor.
Neither are we.
Okay. Okay.
So this
I'm
is
not,
just-
because I don't believe they exist, and I always wanted to have a joint meeting with the planning board and the selectmen down there at that development and say, hey, listen, we need to walk down there and see firsthand the quality, or I think.
Where they are.
Yeah, where they are, the quality of open space that this town got because of this development, and really look at what those bylaws mean, in real life rather than on paper, because they all sounded wonderful on paper, but then, so I'm not happy with it.
Yeah.
So is it gonna be the same, or?
Well, this is a little bit different, and it's not an open space preservation development. It's just a subdivision, and one of the conditions that the planning board agreed on with the developer was to put these trails in. So
who pays to maintain them?
well,
the town?
it will be up to the town. The developer will pay to construct the trails. There's a couple crossings that need to be made. So they would become like any other trail in West Newbury, at Mill Pond or River Bend or anything like that.
Okay, that scares me. Mike, Mr. Needy put money aside. Instead of having an open space development, he gave money to that open space, and there's a pot of money sitting somewhere, right? So he wouldn't have to have, you understand what I'm saying? I know I'm not explaining it too well, because I just thought of it. She was speaking.
No, you're referring to, see, it's not an open space development, which was River Edge and Drake's Landing. It was our inclusionary bylaw that because he was building a number of units less than 10, that he was putting aside money for affordable housing. So he'd make a contribution for that. And and as he sells the property, then he's required to make a deposit for the town. But doesn't have anything to do with trails or anything. Okay.
So we can't use that money for the trails?
No.
No, that's a couple of tents on it. Okay, all I would ask is, that they're mapped out properly, I would assume, so we know where they are and what they are, but at the end. So we know what we have and what we don't have, so if we ever have monies that we can really make a good effort, or if some Eagle Scout says he wants to do it, or, you know, kids, you know, they have to have so many, hours for community service, we'll know where to send them, and it's well marked, so they're not like ripping up, tearing down people's trees.
Well, this is just an informal notification. There'll be a formal notice of intent to the Concom, which will have plans with, you know, maps and all that, which you will have a chance to review as the owner of the property. So,
Do we get to say what, how they're constructed, or is that too much? Or would be three brothers?
if you have input, I'm happy to listen to it. The way that this is gonna move forward is I'm gonna represent the Open Space Committee for Concom and not vote. And so Mr. Needy and I are gonna work out the details of the trails, you know, the proposal for the trails. So if you have input, and, you know.
Well, I don't mean to keep on pounding this, but just, I think the construction of them and somehow that they're maintainable, you know what I mean, in some form or fashion, and just not like wood chips or whatever the other one was. I don't even know, but just, they might say, no, I'm sorry, it's too much, but just mention it, that we want to try to maintain them and keep them, and we don't want them to just not knowing, you know, be overgrown and done.
So are you more concerned with the trail material, the surface itself, or with the encroaching vegetation or whatever?
Both. Just, if we're gonna have trails, I wanna make sure it's realistic that we're gonna be able to maintain them, rather than just say, okay, cut a path down there and just say, oh, that's the trail.
Yeah.
I don't know how much
Well,
we can.
between River Meadow and the development, that's a trail that's used already. It's heavily rutted, so we're gonna move it over to a non-wet area. So that will get used because it's already used.
Right.
So the other trail down to the river, that's a brand new trail, so we'll have to look at possible trail services and some kind of maintenance plan for that. Maybe we could ask. I don't know. We'll have to look
No,
at
you understand my concern,
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
sure how we execute it, but this is the time to ask, and maybe I'm asking for something that, you know, a little bit, that I can't get, but I want to ask it. Okay, thank you. Update on the middle high school project. Angus?
Okay, so before we start, I want to let you know, we do have the screen set up, and I do have the meeting packet for tonight wired into that laptop. So if you want to see anything that's in your packet or you want the public to see, I can set that up, any of the renderings or anything like that. But the short update is that the last Tuesday was a big milestone in the project. It was a joint meeting with the school building committee and the school committee. And this was when we got the final estimated construction cost. And the way that's created, two separate parties come up with costs, and then they put their heads together to agree to a cost. So this is really, at this stage of design, as true a cost as we can get. And this is really the final number that has since been submitted to the State School Building Authority. So the project cost can't exceed that. The cost went down from the prior estimate of $155.4 million to $146.3. So that was some good news coming out of the meeting. And you have before you draft language that we received from bond counsel, which is placeholder to get onto the warrant and onto the ballot for the votes that we needed. But yeah, there's a lot of materials in your packet, the slides that were presented last Tuesday, and let me know if you want to show any of those up on the screen.
I had a question about one of them, Angus, that and someone let me know if I'm wrong, the initial cost, it seemed like I'd seen that the interest rate was going to be 5%, and this is figured at 3%. Is the 3% a good number now?
They think that it is a good number, and
He's very conservative. He thinks it's going to be even lower.
It could be better than that?
Yeah.
Oh,
And it would be not callable, so it would be, that would be locked for the life of the loan. So they actually thought if they, that'll help get it lower.
Okay.
They thought, yeah, they weren't gonna do it like a non-callable loan. They were talking about like 1.7 something, or even lower than the 3%. So they were using a higher number than what they've been advised, just so it doesn't,
Okay.
you know, doesn't increase.
Okay, that's good.
And the only way, you know, in doing it that way, it keeps it, you know, you're locked in a pretty good rate now, and it keeps it pretty steady throughout the loan, so there's no fluctuations. And the only real fluctuation would be enrollment.
The page 2 that shows the estimated average household cost, that probably doesn't reflect the money that we have put away already.
No.
That's correct, it does not. That's prepared by the school business manager, and so he's using the same methodology for every town.
Right.
Right. Can you rerun that spreadsheet so that I mean, I think it was like, with the higher number, I think it was like 300, around 300 or more, a little over 300, but with these new numbers, I don't know what it'll be.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and it shouldn't affect the amount that was already embedded in the current expense budget. It would only be the increment above that that would be lower, because that amount's already, so yeah. it'd be
You
lower.
lost me. So say that again?
Well, so you may remember it gave the estimated cost impact, a portion of which that would be kind of, that's already built into the tax rate, and the portion that would be over and above. So the portion already built into the tax rate isn't going to change. It's going to constitute a higher percentage of the
Right.
total
Yeah,
cost,
yes,
and therefore
yes,
a lower net
yes,
cost.
yes,
Right,
yes.
right.
Okay, now, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it'd be good.
Yeah, I started
As
to
we-
work on that last week, and
Yeah, you got covered up. Yeah.
once it got to 45 minutes, I said, okay, I'll set this aside till after the budget's done. But
That would be good, a good number to have as you begin to have West Newbury specific
Definitely.
meetings.
Very much so.
I'm sure the Council on Aging meeting would love to hear that.
Yeah. We can get that by that Monday.
oh yeah.
Anything else, guys? Anything else you want to tell us about, Archie?
No.
I mean, Angus?
Well, there is, we included a letter in there from Weir Pentucket. I'm not gonna look for board action on that
I
tonight.
actually want to talk about
Okay.
that separately.
Sure.
I want to finish up the update
Okay.
for that. Because I do have some questions and not concerned, but just I want to talk about that separately.
Okay, thanks, yeah, Angus, I have a couple, two questions. One is on the, it's a $9 million decrease, which is about a 6% decrease on the estimate. What made that decrease possible when they
You want my presentation?
yeah, no, just
You can
curious,
make
high
this
level,
one.
is it?
Well, $4.1 million out of it was from the district offices.
Okay, so they took that.
And they sharpened their pencils. Because the first, they started looking at materials. When you still really start doing cost estimates, you start looking at the materials you're going to use. And they made sure they didn't use the expensive ones.
But is the decrease is the district office 4.1, are they now leasing or what are they?
4.4.
4.4, what are they deciding?
Yeah, they would actually preserve the existing district offices and just demo around
Middle
that
school.
and continue to use that, the offices they're using now.
So they're not gonna knock down? I thought the middle school was getting total.
No,
Other than that portion.
That's only
wing,
part of the middle school.
the office wing, they would leave.
I don't know how many square feet that is, but it's minuscule compared to that whole building.
Oh, okay, all right, so that's, so I think
You
that's.
you know when you walk in,
Yeah.
where the
All right.
cafeteria is there, and you walk in, everything to the right there.
Right.
And they can actually utilize them, and
You
that's
can
how
separate that off.
there are some classrooms, I think there's some computer classrooms in there too. So they're gonna be able to do that and everything that way and so on.
So I think that's a key point, so thank you very much, Glenn, on that.
And the revised financing assumptions that Archie mentioned, that's a big driver as well.
But my next question gets to the fields. Because we're gonna talk about that on March, I think, 4th, whatever. But my question deals with, is the fields built into that as well, the artificial turf?
Yes.
Is it the baseball field that they're looking at?
The artificial, all-purpose football But there is a baseball field included in there, but I don't think that's artificial.
Okay, so it's only the football field then?
It's artificial, but the baseball field is part of this. But it's not artificial, if I'm not mistaken.
Because when I talked with the superintendent after that meeting.
I can find out in 2 seconds, so if you want. Do you know the answer to that? Because I don't. Neither do
I'm pretty sure it's not I don't think it's
The reason I'm bringing that to your attention is, when I talked to the superintendent, he told me to go over to Haverhill and take a look at the baseball field, which has a multi-purpose field, which is artificial turf. That's why I asked that question.
You're calling the football field the multi-purpose field.
Because the discussion I had, well, I guess we'll wait until 2 weeks. The discussion I had with the superintendent is why are we building a baseball field when we have more athletes working on multi-purpose fields, which is beyond just football, soccer, lacrosse. Like, so that's why I asked that question. So we can follow up on it in 2 weeks, I guess.
Well, Glenn?
Yeah.
Based upon the design and the presentation, the baseball field's a multi-purpose field. It's not only a baseball field, but in other seasons, you can see that it can be made into other fields. So I think that's the intention, is in the spring it'll be used.
Sure. Please.
I didn't see it. I'm not sure there is a field.
Was there a field somewhere?
There was, yes, there was this on the site
One
plan.
the other night, right here.
Oh, whoops. Don't want to go there yet.
They called it, the other night they called it the multi-purpose one, the football
There-
field. But
No, but the multi-purpose is the football field. That's the one I think they wanted, the artificial turf.
The football field.
Right.
Correct.
But the baseball field can also be used as a multi-purpose field.
Well, yes, all of them can. Because in your diagram, it shows the football field, there's a lacrosse field, as a soccer field, as a bunch of different things.
Mhm.
And then the football field, it really doesn't, yeah, there is maybe a field carved out in the outfield.
Mhm. Right.
I think they're all gonna be used for,
Oh, so the outfield can be used as a.
Right.
Okay.
So it'd be used for maybe
and
JVs.
Bill,
and
your answer to that, their other question, you see that, is that maroon or red?
Yes, yeah,
That's the district offices that are gonna stay.
great, thank you. But what you're saying is then, is the football field having lights or no? Is it lights, do you know?
I doubt it, and that's never been,
Okay.
I've never heard that.
Okay, no, I know, and I'm just asking the question because I thought it was kind of interesting when, and I'll go back to the Haverhill, is when the superintendent told me to go take a look at it. I'll take a look at it again, but I believe that field was artificial, but maybe we're not using artificial, correct? Is that?
That would be new to me.
Okay, all right.
I think it would be really, 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 this is my own personal opinion, really, really, really hard. I think I have enough railings in there to try to pass the cost of 2 artificial fields to the taxpayers. That's my own personal.
No disagreement, but what we were talking about is you probably could put 2, and that's what we'll probably talk about in a couple of weeks, multiple purpose fields here. Because
And not any baseball, you mean?
well, you put move baseball to Groveland or Pipe Stave, because right now we've got the freshman and Pipe Stave anyway, and JV's at Pipe Stave. And the question becomes, do we have enough fields to handle? Because one of the things what we want to do, and I'm trying to, is that we want to sort of eliminate the use of the high
Pipe
school
Stave.
using Pipe Stave fields.
Spur up and try
Yeah.
to preserve them
Because
and.
our fields are getting too beaten up and we're not, All right, but I'm giving you the prelude to 2 weeks, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
All right,
I
thank
will
you.
sleep now until then. If nothing else, you're on the ball with these fields, trying to save ours, and I appreciate that.
No, it's all right, no problem, whatever, but thank you, that's a great picture, thank you.
Okay.
So the only thing that really changed in the whole thing from the beginning, if we want to do it, is that retention pond that they have, they found that we don't need to keep that, ruling from the state. And the house that was sold, that the district bought out of money that they already had, is gone. So that's really, so they'll be able to configure. They talked about the buses coming in on the left, so coming in on the Groveland side, and going down and going behind the building and curving around, and then the students and stuff coming in on the right-hand side. They talked about something last at that meeting about buses then exiting out on Farm Lane, but that wasn't something that even Brad knew about. So if you heard that last meeting, that's not a done deal. I questioned that. And that when they hook into the water, that they're going to be using Groveland's water this time. They were using West Newbury's water, but that pipe broke underneath one of those fields, so they had an emergency already hookup to Groveland. So they'll be using Groveland's water with then a backup in case something happens in a 4-inch main from West Newbury. So
Okay.
it's
Good.
water, you know, supply with water.
Okay.
Okay, is that enough? Okay, can we talk about that letter now, please?
Sure.
James, did you want to start? You want me to pick up my question?
Go ahead.
So this is an unprecedented, this is not unprecedented that we have a town meeting at the high school or the middle school, wherever, whatever they're thinking about, high school, because of the size of projected
Attendance.
turnout,
Yep.
so forth. So, but the only thing about this is that, I wanna make sure that we just show respect to Groveland and Merrimack. It's almost kind of like a rhetorical question to ask them to make sure they don't need it. I've kind of talked to them, and they have some of the capacities, 500 in one elementary school, they said, and they have it in another one, so they're not even thinking down this. But I just kind of want to say, hey, listen, rather than us just trying to do it, show them some respect and say, you guys might be having a big turnout too. We're thinking about maybe doing this. Is that going to
Right.
have any conflict with any of your plans? Just
Right.
some respect. I don't.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm all positive, because I kind of talked to them at the meeting about this, at the last meeting with some people, and they're gonna say no, but it's gonna.
Yeah. That's a good idea. I mean, myself, I think this is a good idea. Our annual town meetings, the ones that have been popular with articles that people want to talk about, the room's been almost to capacity. So I think we really need to do this.
Last time we were there was when the 40B was gonna go up on,
Right.
Great Hill, Creator's Corner. We were there then,
I remember that.
so, okay.
I did speak with the moderator last week. I sent her a copy of the letter and let her know this was going to be in the board's packet, that I didn't think the board would make a formal decision tonight, but she did say that that she's amenable. It's obviously the board's meeting, so the board can set the venue as long as she's fully engaged in how the room is set up, which of course we would do.
Yep.
Okay, so you want to just, rather than just wait, there's not gonna be any more new information that we get over this, other than, if we could send a letter out.
Is the free, is it being used for a play or something?
Yeah, so if we could start and ask Mr. B about the availability, and if we could send a letter saying, hey guys, to Groveland and Merrimack, if you just wanna do it, to the finance directors and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, could you pass it along, just to make sure that we're not stepping on anybody's toes. I would like to do that.
Right. But we're supportive of doing it.
But so if we wanna do it, can you just make it happen?
Are you okay, Archie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike, any problem with that? Okay, obviously, we have to change that, that front sheet when we post everything around town, and make sure that,
Oh my gosh, that'd be a nightmare.
that we get the right address and the right everything that's at the school, rather than just using the one we've used for, 15 years, that says it's gonna be at the end. Okay, great, thank you. Oh, and if, send a response, that we're, back to we have to touch and say thank you, it was a great suggestion.
We're good.
And we're good with it. Next thing is, review the proposed revisions to the Mill Pond, management plan as received from the Mill Pond Committee.
Okay. Mill Pond Committee, Park and Rec Commission, Open Space Committee, and Conservation Commission. So what you have is a document with 3 sets of red lines. We got detailed comments from everybody, and as I noted in my memo, you can tell by looking at it how much time and attention was devoted to this by the various committees and commissions. So I want to thank everybody for that. This is a document that, while it states should be updated every 2 years, actually hasn't been updated in 11 or 12 years. And I can kind of see why, because we started this process in probably September, early October, and it's taken that long to get the various comments. So some of the comments came in pretty recently, so it was kind of all we could do to get it into a single document and get it to you. I haven't circulated this around to the other groups. That would be my recommended next step. I didn't know if the board had feedback before I do that, but I think we ought to send it back now so everyone can see the various comments and suggest. Well, the groups that have provided input: Mill Pond Committee, Open Space Committee, Conservation Commission, and Park and Rec Commission. But in order,
Anything going riding and driving?
we could send it to them. They're not
They're
stated
not
as
part
a
of
party.
it, yeah.
Yeah, they're not a town
But the
committee,
new-
but
I'm sorry, but there's only a few times that my life was, I feel that I was threatened as being a selectman. One of them was when I said, when you know, somebody brushed the table over Board of Fire Engineers, and all 3, and then there's always Dave.
There was a,
Okay.
yeah.
And then when I kind of mentioned about the horse people should maybe clean up after themselves from their horses, this is in here now. That's going to be a new thing that requires that horse people that ride their horses at Mill Pond have to clean up after the horses like the dog people. Good luck.
so as you know, the amendment of this process, or this document, actually requires a process involving all of those groups and potentially others, because the way it's written, the amendment section on page 4 provides for the specific involvement of a number of named groups, including the Board of Selectmen, Mill Pond Committee, Park and Rec Commission, Conservation Commission, and then it refers to, and any other elected or duly appointed municipal board, committee, or commission recognized by the grantor, which is this board, as charged with effectuating the management plan or the conservation restrictions. So in order to amend it, you actually need each of those groups to vote. So that's why I would, it might be helpful to get everyone in one place.
But, yeah, one place, and we need to put a timeline on this, right? If we wanna...
Well, the only section that's kind of deadline driven is that paragraph 16 because of the need for a town meeting vote. The rest of it doesn't need a town meeting vote. We got a lot on our plate. A lot of the edits strike me as kind of housekeeping. Some of them are more substantive, and I think will generate some discussion. So I think if it was sent around to the various groups and some reasonable amount of time, 2 months for any further feedback, it's going to be a process to get to where it's actually voted.
I have one question. One that the Open Space Committee was something that I didn't even know. Withdrawal, item 17, withdrawal of water from the pond. And, like, A, why would someone want to do that, or B, I don't know, it puzzles me.
Why is that there?
Why is it there, but why would it be bad for someone who, I don't know, was putting out the fire and used a couple of buckets of water to put their campfire out?
Well, first of all, I'm almost positive you can have campfire.
Well, you can.
Well, you can't. Yeah, right. Yeah, with the current. Maybe because, as I've, and the police have witnessed, people out in Ash Swamp, people with water trucks, they actually stick their hoses into Ash Swamp and suck it up.
No.
Why?
Yeah, that would stop people from doing that up there. I've actually was driving home from work, and a landscaper guy with one of those huge water trucks was sucking it out of Ash Swamp. We had to have him stop for a host of things, obviously environmental and everything, and he should be. And they thought using it to water his people's grasses the next day or whatever.
Put down the
So,
lawn.
yeah, whatever, they don't have to pay for it. I can't imagine stuff being done there. I don't know. That might be a question, we could ask. Obviously, I'm not sure who made that amendment, who made that. But, no water of excess of 10 gallons should be drunk from the pond. That's all new. Without prior permission, new functioning, so maybe there's people abusing it, I don't know.
Actually, it's really just reframing what's already there, because right now it says no water shall be withdrawn in excess of 10 gallons. So that's, they just moved that preposition.
Okay.
Oh, they're not trying to get rid of it?
Well, there is a comment, you're right, that the Open Space Committee said why not prohibit it altogether, except with permission,
Except for the fire department.
or, right.
I don't know, it's just, I didn't even know anyone thought of it.
We shouldn't take anything on there. I think we're gonna be, dredging that thing again, I think, sometime soon, quite honestly.
Yep.
The levels seem really, really low to me.
So I guess the main question is, do you want me to send this around to the various parties now that it's got everything in one place?
Yeah, you have to.
Right. And then set what time, couple of months out to give people time to,
Couple of months sounds like a great time to me.
I bet it does.
Are you done with this? Anytime after the town meeting?
Perfect.
Perfect.
Sound
Yeah.
good?
Yeah, oh yeah,
May 6th.
May 6th.
Make sure it's the first thing on the agenda.
There's no meeting on May 6th. No, it's an off week.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
You know my point.
Yes, I do.
All right.
So the next item is closely related because the Park and Rec Commission and their comments in response to the management plan invitation to comment were whether it's possible to revise the management plan to basically allow a dog park or at least to allow for conditions where Greenbelt could approve a dog park. So we did look into that question with town council. He felt, and I agree, that the management plan couldn't do that. You would need to amend the conservation restriction to do that. And just to paraphrase Mike, and I don't know if you want to supplement this, but basically where the current conservation restriction does allow an active recreation use, namely the fields, it specifically states that in the CR. So in Code of Mass regulations, a dog park is considered active recreation. So by extension, Mike feels, and I agree, that it would need to specifically allow that, like it does with the field, rather than kind of reading it a different way. And I know that Greenbelt's in agreement with that as well.
Yep, they've already given them that they wouldn't agree with it.
So then the question becomes, is there an interest in beginning down that process? And you've got the materials in your packet which sketch out what would be involved with initiating a potential CR amendment. And my advice would be to not make a decision on that question tonight. I think you ought to kind of bring in the parties of interest and have a discussion and then make a decision of whether that's something you want to initiate. But we do have some parties in interest here tonight, so we would just.
Well, wouldn't be I don't understand this is the road you go, but wouldn't it be, why even discuss something that that Greenbelt might not let us have?
I think Greenbelt,
So
if,
why don't we see if we can, what they will allow?
well, it's,
And then we can then
yeah.
talk about all the parties if what we want to do.
I mean, it's a chicken and egg thing. I have talked with them about that specific question of, is this something that you see, do you agree, does Greenbelt agree that this is an allowable use under Article 97 if the CR provides for it? And the answer is yes. It's not, a factory. It's something that is legitimately within what could be allowed with a CR. The current CR doesn't allow it, but it's something that could be allowed. So they want to respond to a specific proposal. They've represented that they're very open to working with the town, qualifying that by saying that that's staff level contacts. It's not their board, which ultimately would have to act. But I think they'd be hard pressed to give an opinion that they would allow it until there's a proposal on the table of exactly what's being asked.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Greenbelt again is running how we wanna do it, so nailed all the cards and gave them $25,000-$30,000 to do this to us. So, we have no choice. Is that what you're saying? Greenbelt doesn't wanna act on any of this till we come up with a concrete proposal that they can put in front of them and vote on. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they haven't been asked whether they would allow this or not, and I don't feel that I would have. I think it would be pretty presumptuous of me to ask them to give an opinion on that when I don't know if that's, the intent of this board, which is the grantor. If this board says we'd like them to give an opinion on this, I think they'll ask, okay, what is this? And I know Bill would be happy to speak to that. He's provided materials which were provided to you. So I think if you want to put that on the table and ask them to give you an opinion on that, I think they would do that. But right now, everything I've asked them is in the nature of want to make sure I understand the process so we can advise the board properly. I'm not going to ask them to give to review something on my own. That's not my authority. That's this board's authority.
Well,
So.
the process of changing the conservation restriction is not onerous, but it is a significant amount of work. We wouldn't want to get to that point without them,
Right.
and then they say, yeah, that's nice, but no.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Why put us through the whole arduous process if the end result's gonna be no? I guess we can give them some type of a conceptual idea and say, hey, you're gonna do it or not, and then we'll go through the process. Or would you believe?
With the possibility that they could turn it down, but at least we would have a good idea that they might go for.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just gonna give some background to this. Do you remember the background, or do you want me to review the background?
If you can give us the.
From a very high level. So back about probably about 14 months ago.
Excuse me, just make sure, this is interesting, so make sure you're talking.
Okay, about 14 months ago, we started out looking for an area for a retreat dog park, mainly for citizens who didn't want to walk their dogs, but go in and provide a community, and would be senior citizens, handicapped, and others. And the area that we found that we felt at the time that was the most advantageous was the one is when you enter the mill pond, the lower mill pond, the piece of property that basically, there's the parking lot here and the dogs and the horses go here, but right behind it is a piece of land that basically was built up based on the dredging of the pond. And so we went down that path, and then we met with the Mill Pond Committee on January 8th, I think it was 2018, and provided them the proposal of what we were thinking of doing and if they wanted to move forward. And the idea was to present just a conceptual design. They approved it 5-2. Part of the discussion that was quite interesting there was the ability to control dogs. There were some other things that went on with, we don't control the dogs running around Mill Pond. We had a situation where one of the individuals had a horse, fell off a horse, got attacked. That led to a discussion of what were the items that they wanted us to address. One was sound, and I brought in an audio person who I work with. And it turns out, because one of the things that they were concerned about was the sound coming off the water in the pond. Well, when the water's down there and sound carries quite nicely off the water. But if you take a look where the dog park was going to be located, it was pretty well enclosed with trees and things. It's about 0.15 to 0.2 miles from the nearest house. So those were the two questions, and the third one was getting back to dogs, attacking each other within an enclosed dog park. And I've been to dog parks. I don't own a dog, and I started walking around and realized that the dogs there really don't fight with each other. They're pretty well controlled. Now, having said that, you are gonna have some issues sometimes, who knows? So with that, the vote was 5-2. We went ahead and said, great, now we'll go to Essex County and talk to them. And that's when they stated that, Greenbelt, and Dave Rimmer in that paragraph A9 on page 3 stating active recreation activities defined by the need for fixed facilities included the creation of maintenance of playgrounds, soccer fields, ballparks, football fields, or other active recreation facilities of any kind. Basically, that concludes that a dog park retreat as described in that report falls within the definition of those activities. That's the one sentence. And I think, Mike, you've looked at it because you and I talked about it at one point. And then Angus went and talked with Mike. And I believe Greenbelt has now moved off that point.
Well, I think what they've said is that without language in the CR, they can't approve it. They haven't said they wouldn't consider
What's the
an
process
amendment.
to change the CR? Maybe I want to understand that. Do you mind?
No, good.
The process. No, you just hit the button. It's on, kill, mute.
The process is set out in the CR itself. It says that the grantor and grantee can amend any provision of the CR, provided that the amendment isn't in violation of the purposes of Article 97 of the Constitution of Massachusetts, basically to be consistent with the stated uses in the interim for open space, active and passive recreation, and the like. So what I would envision would be to get the stakeholders, together and do a conceptual plan, but one with relative detail, as Bill pointed out, where it would be located, how much of it would be located, staking it out a little bit, describing, so that everyone knows exactly what we're talking about here, and get everyone to say, look at this, everyone here, all the people who could be involved, Park and Rec, Mill Pond Committee, anyone who's involved with.
We've already done all of that. So
Okay,
all those-
but to sign on to a specific plan, this is what we have.
Which you already have done.
Well, again, to show it out, to detail it out, and then once you have that, then go to Greenbelt and say, okay, Board of Selectmen, everyone else has agreed on this, and then to literally draft an amendment, just basically saying that it would be amended, and to change the,
Who has to vote on that amendment? Us? The Board of
it's
Selectmen?
you are the grantor.
Yeah.
So you have to vote.
We would vote on the amendment, then present it to them, and then their board would have to vote on it.
Right.
And then it would be part of now the CR.
Right, and then the final step, because we had the executive office approve it, as you do with the CR, would have the executive office sign off on it too. I'm assuming that since it's an active recreational use, there are other active recreational uses in the CR. If both parties are agreeable to this, then I really don't see anything from the state standing in the way.
And you're just saying that they can't approve it because it's not part of the CR, but they see that it does fall under that Article 97. So as long as
We have to amend the CR to include this.
But I'm saying that Greenbelt feels that this does.
Yes, it's an active
meet that
recreation.
threshold,
Yes,
that-
that's right.
whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know at a staff level, they'd be happy to come to a meeting, they'd be happy to be fully engaged in the process. I think that the trick is that the staff can't bring something to their board, because their board's gonna say, just as this board would say, well, what exactly are we being asked about? At staff level, they're fully engaged.
I got it. So we have something.
No, we need to have the actual amendment, we need to have a plan showing what it is,
Well, it is the situation, Mike. So we've written this, I don't know if you saw this or not, it gets into pretty detail of where it was gonna be located and all sorts of dog rules and things, but what we decided upon with the Mill Pond Committee was, what they wanted to see was the design. What is the design of that dog park? We know exactly where it needs to be. What's the design? Well, we didn't want to go ahead and spend the money or the time on the design until we got the agreement with the Essex County Greenbelt, so it's a chicken and egg.
Yeah, I know.
So, but I mean, if we said, all we're looking for is that piece of land, that's it. Because
With a
that's,
conceptual thing that it's going to be fenced and
yeah,
XYZ, 5 feet high, 6 feet high, with a door on it, gonna be open at this time of the day with those rules, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, and then you could also maybe just have somebody go out there and actually stake it out. You
yeah,
know?
and I consider somebody in that. The only challenge I have now is I don't know where Mill Pond Committee is at anymore, because this is over a year, 14 months ago. Or
Mhm.
when's it?
But we'd have to be able to do that, present it, and get everyone to sign off. Because I think important for the town is to be able to represent the Greenbelt. Look at, everybody who's involved down there is on board with this. This is something the town wants, and that support is gonna go a long way into having Essex County Greenbelt say, well, this is something we should support.
And I think with the Mill Pond Committee, I think they would want to take a look at it. I went to their last couple of meetings, and throughout this Mill Pond management plan, I've been trying to keep all the groups apprised as I get comments, just to say, hey, these are comments I've gotten. So I advised the Mill Pond Committee that this suggestion had come in, and the response was, we thought that wasn't allowed under the CR. And so it's a little different because it's not allowed under the CR. The question would be, do we initiate an amendment? And it seemed to me from going to the meeting, it's divided. I think there's some support. I know there's some opposition. I don't know what the majority is. They didn't take a vote. But
You're talking about the Mill Pond Committee.
Mill Pond Committee.
What is the opposition?
I don't want to speak for others. I'm just telling you the
So
sense
what do we
I got
wanna do?
from the meeting.
So it sounds like the vote that you took, that doesn't matter anymore.
No, that's how I feel, because it's just been so
Too long?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what would probably be best is if we go back to the Mill Pond Committee, talk to them, let them know. But then the question becomes, if Dave Brenner saw this report, and he knew exactly where we were putting it.
He did or did not?
He did.
Yes, okay.
Oh, yeah, he
did.
did, oh, yeah, I said, this was done on January 30th, he made his thing on February, I talked to him multiple times. And so my question is, do we send this over to Dave and say what is missing?
Well, what I think if the town goes forward with this, what I think is going to end up being really a big kind of point of contention is, would allowing this trigger the need for any kind of compensatory land protection, meaning outside the bounds of this property. And I think their starting point would be that it would trigger that need.
I need that explained to me.
Okay, so there's a no net loss requirement under Article 97. You can't take something out of conservation without adding.
I understand that.
So I think the issue is, would this represent taking it out of conservation? I think that the town's position would be that it wouldn't, that it's fully consistent. But I think their starting point, my sense is their starting position would be that it would require some additional land. So I think if we go down this road, I think that's going to end up being kind of the threshold.
You know what? If that's the case, I want them here to say that to me. Then I want them to come in, because that's okay. Then there goes the relationship, in my mind. Patricia, you want to?
I'd like a question, first of all, on the no net.
Yeah, pick them up.
You can't.
I'm
I'm sorry.
Sit next to me.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Amos. On the no net loss concept of conservation, does that come from Article 97?
Yes.
Okay, but if you've gotten an opinion that the dog park is within the purview of Article 97,
Then there is no.
then it sounds like there's no net loss.
I think the town has a very strong case, and I think that's the right answer, but I think that's not going to be the starting point. So I think that's going to be a negotiation.
I mean, wouldn't you be thinking that, like, we're not, I don't know what would be done, but suppose it's a fence or something, we're not talking about paving and building a structure or something like that. So it doesn't seem like that's taking something out of conservation.
Taking it out, it's
I'm
a
just,
pile
right.
of
I'm just
fill,
but yeah.
which we're actually going to utilize it for good things, that nobody's probably stepped on it. It's actually,
To your point, Glenn, can I just say that there's another pile of fill that could be put to this use, I believe, pending some further investigation with the Board of Health, which is the old landfill over on Georgetown Road. It's several acres in size.
Well,
It has no trees on it.
No, but I
Yeah,
think
but
one of the
we-
things, I think, the reason the Parks and Rec was interested in the dog park and that little pond is because it's within the community. It's the same idea of why we wanted the fields next to Pike State, because everything is situated to where everybody goes. You start putting things on Georgetown Road, I can guarantee you, I'll have the whole Georgetown Road residents up in arms.
Well,
Same
parking-
problems I'll have is Chase Street.
Well, I would understand that too, but I wouldn't actually, we've been dealing with problems with that landfill and the improper capping of it, I think, years ago, and I would rather stay away from that. And let
It was a
sleeping.
great idea though.
No, I understand, but.
Other than that.
Yeah, other than all that, it was a great idea. No, but there's no parking, there's no, I mean, this is, you're right, this is where people go.
But I think the next step then would
it
be.
wouldn't be too crowded if you put it there.
Yeah.
So why don't we do it this way, Angus, because I know that we're gonna be focused on the school and the budget, so maybe after the town meeting.
This could be a fall town meeting.
Yeah, we'll meet with the mill pond and stuff, okay, does that make sense? Because I think we're all pretty well.
It does. I mean, word travels fast, so they'll probably, may put it on their agenda anyway, just to proactively talk about it if they do. I mean, what I've been doing
So
with
that
this
means
management
they're going
plans.
to. You
Well-
might want to stay, that means.
Yeah, just please invite me, and I'll be happy.
Of course, no, so
Yeah.
the management plan, since there are a number of parties to it, and I have been trying to keep everyone aware, and now coming out of this meeting, I'll send out this draft red line to all of those groups. And so that may put that issue back on the table, and, people may talk about the dog park in the context of that.
How do we get Greenbelt going with their quote-unquote starting point negotiation on this?
I don't know, maybe Mike and I meet with them and say, look, guys, this is how we see it. We think you're on, not on solid ground here, and can we talk you off the ledge before we.
Yeah, but I don't see that.
Because I think Mike and I both feel that would be overreach.
Yeah, so do would I. I don't think that meeting's gonna go too well if they come in here. And that's them saying that. I don't think so. I don't know why, but I just don't.
So I'll tell you what, Angus, however you want to play, just let me know, and I'll be ready to go. I'll clean this up a little bit. Do some work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, no problem, thank you, guys.
Proposed town meeting warrant articles. What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Okay, so you've got a summary memo that sets out all of the warrant articles that either were received or proposed by my office or by this board. And I think the intent tonight is to close the warrant. So this
We
is
have one
basically.
more addition to that.
Yeah, we did have a citizen petition article come in today. And the one revision that I'd like to suggest for what's in your packet is on the revolving funds.
Can you give us a number?
Number 2. The list does not currently include a Mill Pond revolving fund, and it's been brought to my attention in the last couple of days by the town accountant. There used to be a Mill Pond revolving fund. It hasn't been reauthorized for the last year or more, and in the normal course of things, the funds that are sitting there, which is about $5,000, would
Can't be
lapse
used?
into the general fund at the end of this fiscal year. So if the goal is to have those funds continue to be available toward Mill Pond, which I think would be favorable, then I would recommend adding the Mill Pond revolving fund back to this list.
Okay. Do you guys have any opposition to that?
Nope.
Any discussion?
Just
Fine.
one thing?
Yep. Isn't there a cable one too?
No, hit the cable. The problem with that, if it's a revolving fund, under the new municipal modernization, we have to amend our bylaw in order to incorporate the Mill Pond as an additional one. So we'd have to make a bylaw amendment in order to add it.
But
Yeah.
how did it get taken on?
It was never reauthorized. This is something, this change that took,
Authorize it every year?
yes.
Or it gets just taken off?
Yes,
Unfortunately,
under the old way of doing it, yes, you had to reauthorize it every year, okay? And when they changed it, they said they put revolving funds under your bylaw, and then the only thing you need to do is to basically authorize an amount for each revolving fund that we have, and we have 3 of them
In subsequent years?
in subsequent years. So you don't have to re-up them every year, you just add an amount which can be changed by you actually during the year. The cable fund is a different matter. The DOR has ruled that the cable fund is not a revolving fund, it's a special purpose municipal fund. And as such, it is authorized under a separate statute, not the revolving fund statute, and can be appropriated can be spent without appropriation.
Got it. So whatever it is, I think we're all in approval that we do it, we just have to get there from here. So whatever it takes, Angus.
Okay, it doesn't sound like that would be a big drafting
No.
exercise to change that bylaw, so we
No.
could
Let's do it.
add that as a placeholder to this warrant.
Can I go back on something that was on our agenda earlier? I reminded myself by thinking about the percentage vote. You want to tell everybody the news about the percentage votes that we found out? It's very interesting.
It's a simple majority
It's a simple majority on everything
for the school.
from all 3 towns. They just got that information last week.
So Mike's original premise was correct, is that
Oh,
what you're
yeah.
saying?
Everybody else thought it was all different. It was like news to everybody.
The only thing is that when you vote, the 2/3 vote is actually from you when you vote to put on the override.
Right,
It has to be a 2/3 vote of the Board of Selectmen
that's true.
in order to put on a capital outlay. Which is kind of a tautology here because you need two, you need 2 of the 3 to vote it anyway,
no,
so.
but it could be.
But in Groveland-
A member board is different.
In Groveland, they need 4 of the 5.
The best, I think, the most enlightening thing about going to these school building meetings, being a representative, is that we heard an answer on this voting of how there was 1,000 different ones, and everybody from each town had a different concept of 2/3 this, and how many towns had to do it, and this one and that. So the DLS came back on the last meeting and said that.
How come that wouldn't be like something that someone would
It
have
just-
known
it just-
25 years ago?
It just confused people.
One of the confusing elements to, I think, to the other towns' finance directors was, where it's debt exclusion, but it's the school district debt, not the town, so that changes the threshold,
Yeah,
so that's,
special.
Right.
If it was town debt, it would have been 2/3.
right.
Yes.
But it's district debt, so it's a simple majority.
It still has to be 2/3 of the school committee.
Right. Yes, yeah, they're putting it on, of course. The school committee's different than, we're talking about the votes of town meeting and the votes of.
I get it, I know.
I'll just remind you, I wrote this memo in September, okay, so.
Take a red pencil and go home with it.
So-
One thing that might be interesting to us, or helpful to us, is what's the projected revenue sources of all these articles? That might be nice.
That's actually, you've got that. You don't have it in there, but you have it in the final page of the budget. So I'm glad you asked.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we can get that later. Yeah, I haven't even seen that. You just gave it.
Yeah, no, I just sent that up today, so I wouldn't expect.
Okay.
Just blend one thing.
Yep.
With the number of, on the memo and number of articles, the only one I didn't see is our traditional instructions to the water department.
Yes, I wrote that down.
Okay, we have to do that one.
So what's the purpose of tonight? Are we supposed to like review these, ask questions, or what are we doing here?
Same as a budget.
Mary and I had talked about, I'd sent her that article, but I guess that it's kind of a standard recurring article. It was left off this memo, so I guess if you're gonna close the warrant, it ought to,
I didn't,
I guess, use some.
He added.
I think this is what we received.
Okay.
Not-
So,
not-
Oh, these are the ones you received, but there are standard ones that.
I did
Yeah.
make efforts to
Exactly.
provide standard ones.
Okay, Okay, there we go.
That was the,
So, to go back to Joe's
And
question,
there's like the one about the town election.
the town election.
exactly,
Yeah,
those
I
standard
got it,
ones,
I got it.
right.
So to go to Joe's question, what do you want us to do with these?
So, I don't know, we could just, I don't want to talk about everyone tonight, certainly, we don't have time, but if you want to go down and basically flag those that you might like added to the next agenda for a more detailed review. And I do want to draw your attention to item 5 on the water borrowing authorization regarding the Briggs Hill tank and the well and chemical building. I did send a draft of bond council language to the town moderator last week, and she expressed some concerns with the form of the article. She's totally favorable to the intent of the article, but I spoke to her again today, and we're going to set up a call with bond council, and I'll include Mike in that later this week to get to the proper form. So that what's listed as one article could end up becoming 2 articles. So whatever action you take tonight, I'd recommend that you leave the door open for a second article in that same topic if necessary.
Okay. Any other comments?
There's also a placeholder article on here for CPC. They meet again this Thursday. This is phase 2 of the historic property survey, and that came in after they had kind of recommended the land acquisition. So
I thought you were meeting last week.
No, they could have met last week, but
I thought you guys were gonna meet.
this Thursday.
it's this week, it's Thursday. So it's a placeholder.
So the CPA administrator wasn't sure if a placeholder would work. I told her I'd put it on the list and I would recommend that to this board. But obviously it's up to you where you don't have that specifically in front of you. But it's the same grant that you had in your last packet. You had all the grant materials from the commission, historic commission.
Okay, anything else?
As you look down the list, do you want to flag any that you'd like added to?
Yeah, just,
Yeah, oh, hold on, I thought we weren't doing that.
no, not for tonight.
No.
He wants to know for
the
next time.
agenda to do a deeper dive.
No, but I would like to,
So the only 2 I'd like to get, just to go into a further explanation and of the details, no objection or anything like that, but number 18 and number 27, if we could just kind of walk through those.
not now. okay?
Not now. Yeah, not now.
When are we gonna take our votes if we wanna have them on there, if we're gonna take anything off? 18, $93,000 of improvements and repairs in public safety complex and town offices. Okay,
And 27, just to explain.
who's putting that one in? Is that the DPW people, or is that?
Yes, the DPW director. Yeah, there's the article has some backup in there.
Okay. Okay, so you want some more?
There are specific projects associated with that.
What was it?
27.
I wanted,
27.
This is a, do you want me to speak to that now, or? Okay. It's an auditor recommendation.
Okay.
10. I just want, I had some questions about it, and just, so we can, when people ask about it, we can know what we're talking about.
Okay.
The senior,
And that's based on a new statute that
Right.
allows them to increase the amount.
Yeah.
exemption, property tax exemption.
That's an opt-in statute.
Okay. I mean, most of them look pretty straightforward.
I mean, there's a number of things that certainly warrant some discussion.
Mhm.
So, you can also send me a note offline and we can, add
Is
as
there-
many of these to the.
Is there anything you want to call out to discuss particularly?
Let's see, there were a couple of things that I put memos in the last packet, that I'd recommend. One thing on the Mill Pond Management Plan, my starting point for the article that I prepared is to simply change that article, that paragraph 16, to the language that everyone thought was in effect in 2007. So if there's any intent to do something different than that, we may need to pass off on
I
this.
think it's a good idea for this.
I think-
Anything
yeah.
else is way.
That's my opinion, is to
Premature.
get something done this April. I think that everyone thinks that's the language anyway, so it's kind of housekeeping. if there needs to be a substantive change to that, I would think that would be a future
Yes.
action.
Did the, Joe, did the CPC approve the River Road?
Yes. Yes, they did.
Property acquisition?
Yep.
Okay.
That's Greenbelt, right?
Mhm.
Hmm,
And there's a CR involved.
yeah, exactly. Good luck. 22, are we at 110 already, or is that a guesstimate?
Guesstimate.
That's a
That's a
guesstimate.
guess.
So that'll change based on actual.
When can we really put that in our operating budget?
Well, we could, then that's
So
actually,
people
that's,
really feel and understand
yep,
when they,
I've,
Glenn, we haven't even spent the appropriated amount yet.
yeah, but you know what my point is. Every single year it's an extra $150,000.
But we'd be the only town in Massachusetts
And
that did that.
This year, we might not have any extra.
We might not have any.
Good luck.
yeah, I mean, that is something I've talked to the,
Do you
FinCom.
understand what I mean about
Yeah,
that?
oh, I know
Because
exactly what you
It's
mean.
a good
yeah.
way of, whatever. Never mind.
The issue is, and in the,
I'll lose that battle every time.
in the proposed budget, it does talk about.
Gary Roberts is added to that.
This- Okay, here it is. So, in the proposed budget, I've carried the same 150,000 that was included in the FY19 budget for snow and ice. If you look at the average expenditure for the last 10 years, it's 221,000. So if I wanted to budget, or if we wanted to budget for the average expenditure, that would mean adding about 71,000 to the operating budget. So I understand fully your point, Glenn, that, you know, this could be seen as kind of a backdoor to increase that amount. But,
Well, it is.
well, but we don't know how much the snow and ice costs are gonna be.
I know, but
And
if
you
you're
do
going
that,
to do serious budgeting, I think an excellent way of doing it is averaging it out over 10 years.
and that's a choice that you can make, and as you go through the budget and you need
That's a
to.
good thing.
We gotta
and you
add
need to
70,000.
Maintain the 2% increase, you will need to find another
You can
$71,000.
I agree.
You want to
Yep.
keep you mentioned earlier tonight, you wanted to keep, maybe we're over plowing or whatever, correct?
That's a way to reduce it.
So if you want to bump the budget up, you're giving people a green light to plow more.
No, but then people, I agree, but then people really understand the pain of what's really happening. That it just seems to be like a fairy tale, you know, everybody's saying, hey, our roads are great, which our roads are awesome, but there's a cost for that. Like our new DPW director, the first thing when we had that beautiful open house, well, beautiful open house, now I'm starting to sound like the president. When we had that, when we
Really beautiful.
yeah, really beautiful. But when we had that nice time and he was welcome to the town, like the first thing somebody walked up to him and said, you better keep these roads just as well as Gary did. And I tried to say to him, Gary did an awesome job, but you want to thank the taxpayers, because those are the ones we spend more money
On our
than
roads.
any other town.
Yeah, we do.
There's a reason why, that they're up. I feel comfortable if we devise a new plan, maybe this is the way you negotiate things. You know, my starting point is, fine, but let's devise a new plan when our trucks are deployed and how they're being deployed. Maybe we need to change that.
It's a good idea, be more efficient. And there we go.
Rather than just a policeman seeing it starting to snow, then he calls dispatch and they call everybody out.
You could put little wire heaters in all the roads.
Is that how it works?
Yes. When our own workers is telling us we go out too much, it's ridiculous. It's
Night, Patricia.
I'll do you
On that note. Night. Anything else on the warrant articles?
Anything else? No. But I want to go through them line by line, dot by dot.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
So,
So one thing, I have to say this, okay, because it only opens the door. We're not having any more placeholders.
I thought we said that last time, and the time
We
before.
have one, so we have one, but we kind of know what it was, and we're waiting for a meeting, so depending on if you guys vote no.
The meeting could have been held last week.
But I don't want this to open the door for somebody to say, oh my God, I forgot something, and you did it for somebody else. Because I've heard that before, do you know what I mean?
I do.
When we've told,
Yeah.
when we've told people no, and then we have, then all of a sudden, the next couple of days, things came out of the woodwork. Or next week, you know, when we forgot something, or somebody said, oh my word, something happened, so,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, because when I initially got it from CPA administrator, that was, the respondent said, I thought the window had closed. But where this is the phase 2 grant and the board has received all of those materials, and I think there's a very high probability CPC will recommend
Yeah,
it.
that's the only reason.
It is a little bit different, but I
would agree with
understand
that.
board's
I would agree with
position
that.
in terms of-
Okay, if nothing else, refer proposed zoning bylaw amendments to the planning board to revise the erosion control performance standards, section 7, 8, 11 performance standards in compliance with the NPDES, non-point pollution discharge and elimination system, MS4 phase 2 stormwater permit.
Could we first get a motion and a second to close the warrant?
I make a motion to close the warrant.
Second.
Discussion. We are not, with the understanding that the full warrant is not in front of us, that there are,
Water department instructions.
there are,
The recurring articles like that.
yeah, whatever, I'm trying to get it, okay.
This-
Just want to make sure of that.
Yeah.
There's an understanding.
And
We're not
that
quoting.
the water borrowing could end up being 2 articles.
Mhm. Okay.
So,
Okay, with that, so we have a better understanding.
I don't, that's not a new one.
right.
One becomes 2, that's
Doing it right.
Yeah,
We've done that with
Yeah.
the moderator that's changed things, to make sure we get it right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you. So now to the next item, Glenn, that you mentioned. So as you know, there are 3 entities that can initiate a zoning amendment. The Board of Selectmen is one, Planning Board, and Citizen Petition. The Planning Board, I would look to the board to recommend or to refer to the Planning Board for hearing proposed amendments to the site plan review bylaw, which will help bring us into compliance with the stormwater general permit.
but this won't be in time for,
Yes, it absolutely will. This has been months in the making, believe it or not. We kept the language really clean and simple,
okay?
which was the intent.
Sounds like a big deal, but I guess.
No, it took a lot of slogging, and there's a lot of work ahead. But part of this is it's actually bringing our current zoning to where it actually should have been for the prior general permit.
Gotcha.
So-
Okay, so, anyone make a motion? Do we have to have a motion?
Just to refer it to the planning board.
I move to refer the article request to the planning board.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, acceptance of minutes. Anyone make a motion? Any questions?
Move to approve the minutes of November 13th, 2018.
Second. Moved second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, there's other minutes.
Yes.
Move to approve the minutes of November 26th. I'm presuming that's 2018.
You do not have
We
that
didn't
for
get
December
those.
3rd.
No.
Okay.
We got one in the mail.
Yeah, the 13th.
Email.
We only have
Email,
the,
that was November 26th.
no,
That was the 26th.
13th.
I had no problem with that one either.
yeah, 13th is in the packet.
13th.
26 is what, the one we got in the email.
I don't look at that.
So let's do 26 also. Okay, I make a motion to approve the minutes,
I just said that.
November 26th.
Second, did you want to look at it?
No.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then we're gonna, table the December 3rd. Okay, town manager proposed, FY 20 budget, management message, and departmental and organizational structure, and schedule for finance committee budget review meetings.
I've kept the presentation pretty brief just to kind of frame what's in front of you and what is the process ahead. And I'll start by saying that
That's a great one.
it's nice, isn't it?
No, but the vibrancy of the colors is really
Clear.
good, yeah.
Love it. Need that in my bedroom.
So I'm going to start just by saying, for those in the public or audience, this board has had no time to review this, so I do not, so I just want to be very clear on that. So this is a proposed budget presentation. I want to start by just recapping the policy direction that the selectmen set back in December, which really framed my work on this. The selectmen's goal is to, or the selectmen's direction, I should say, to me, is to prepare a budget that limited the estimated operating budget impact to no more than 2% on the average household. To take into account proposed capital planning and projects within the proposed budget. More of an operational thing is to update the chart of accounts, and I say that because the account structure in this budget may differ slightly from what is actually programmed into the FY20 new accounting software. To set out a clear and transparent budget process, to take into account the anticipated adoption prior to the end of this fiscal year of all of the community compact policies, to take into account any estimated impacts of new regulatory mandates, to specify the authorization to expend funds. What I mean is for each section of the budget that it's clear who has signing authority, so that as I'm reviewing warrants in FY20, I can make sure that it's signed by the entity of interest. It sounds obvious, but it isn't always, although it's gotten better. To build 3 years of revenue and expense projections, to dig deeper into the police and dispatch budgets and why those budgets have changed in the last few years. And again, there was another policy issue on the Division of Local Service financial
Is
policies.
there anything there that was problematic or that you really weren't able to fully do or do all?
The 3-year revenue, the 3-year history you have. The 3-year projections I'm still working on, because until I have what I'm proposing, I can't do the projections because it all was kind of
Basically just got this done. So.
Exactly, yeah. So, but I've got the basis for that. I've kind of designed it. You know, one thing that's really nice about how I've put this together, which I think you'll see the value of and FinCom will as we dig into the process, it's a really dynamic model. So I can change something to one thing, whether it's COLA, whether it's, any specific variable, it will run through the bottom line. Okay. It's all interlinked. So things like, what would be the impact if we did this? I can give that to you in a snap. So
when you say to the bottom line, is the bottom line the average single family, the tax rate, or the budget total?
I think my presentation will speak to that, and if it doesn't, we can circle back to that. It's because it goes to the bottom line expense budget, but I've also projected revenues and increase of revenues, so that results in the net impact. It's not the tax impact, but it's the kind of 2%. But I'll explain it, and you can.
Okay.
So yes, the 3 years of projections. That's really that was the only thing that was kind of beyond the norm in terms of budget prep. So just kind of how to read the budget. You've got a 35-page budget in front of you with, I think, 6 pages of appendices. So page 1 is the expense summary, and that's what you see here to the right of the screen. That takes everything and all of the detail and puts it all on one sheet, which I think is helpful. And that I don't believe has been done in the past, so I think that's kind of nice. And I've also made clear, both in this summary sheet as well as in all of the detailed backup, what the initial proposed budget was and what my proposed budget is, so that to the extent those numbers differ, and this especially in the FinCom meetings, that they can say, hey, department proposed this, you proposed that, why is that? And we can get into those trade-offs that.
Can I ask one specific question? Really, like for the Essex County retirement, do you get when you get that assessment?
We've received that. That's a known number.
Okay.
Page 2 is the estimated taxpayer impact, which I've actually got a detailed slide on that in a couple of minutes. There's only 16 slides, so I'm not going to be here all night. Pages 3 to 35 are the detail sheets, and it's not, there's a lot of page breaks in there, so you can focus on what you're focusing on, so it's not actually 35 pages of fine print. Then you have a number of appendices, some known and fixed increases, summary information. I'll speak to that in a few minutes. Page 2. Yeah.
Go back to page 2.
Sure.
3. So it says, amount FY20 expense budget can increase with estimated 2%. So is that what this is?
Yeah, and I have that chart in this presentation.
Okay.
So I'm going
to get to it.
I'm going to present that in detail. Yeah. Known and fixed increases. Page 2 and 3 is local receipts, history, year to date, and projected, and that becomes very important because every dollar that we raise other than from property tax revenue, we don't have to raise from property tax. So getting a good figure for projected local receipts is very important in terms of estimating the net effect. Pages 4 or 5 of the appendices is a 10-year history of assessed values, tax rate, trends, and average. And then the final page is that draft fund balance report. I think that, I forgot, one of you had asked earlier, where's the money coming from on the warrant articles? That's all on the very last page of that packet is the draft report you're used to seeing in the FinCom booklet. Obviously, it's marked draft, but the numbers are all based on what's in front of you in terms of warrant articles. So this is an example of one of the detail sheets. You've got your FY17 and 18 actual expended. If you want budgets, I have all of those columns, so I can just unhide the column and provide any information you want to keep it not too overwhelming in terms of the amount of data. I've hidden the FY17 budgeted and turnbacks, but I have all of that data in here, but it ends up being unwieldy. So I put in actual for 17 and 18, adopted budget for FY19, year to date, both amount and percent. Then the next column over is the FY20 DH/BCC. That means department head / board commission committee, depending on who is the originator of each section of the budget. And the proposed change, both dollars and percent, in that initial proposal that I received. Then the next column is what I've proposed and the dollar and percent impact there. And then for those sections with anything going on, I've added some notes right on the same page to make it clear as you're reviewing it. So the estimated taxpayer impact.
Question.
Yeah.
On the Pentucket assessment,
Mhm.
I mean, we used to have it broken up between the minimum contribution and the other assessment.
Mhm.
Is there any reason why we can't have that now?
Well, I did it in the same format as the approved budget.
That's what we did it last year.
Yeah.
But in years prior to that, we had the minimum contribution,
Mhm.
which was the number that the state said we
Yeah.
have to have.
Sure. Oh, that'd be easy to
I
add.
don't know if that, because then it shows which above that we would be assessed.
Can you say again how we, I know exactly what you're talking about, but the way you did.
The previous, we haven't, in the last couple of budgets, we have just lumped together the school assessment.
The total.
With the minimum contribution and the other assessment.
But what do we used to call
It would be other assessment. It would be.
The foundation aid, foundation budget.
it? Something else.
We always called it the minimum contribution,
Yeah, the minimum contribution.
supplemental budget, or.
Well, yeah, and I think the reason why we changed that, because I think it was confusing to the taxpayers. And that's the reason why we wanted to say it in one lump sum, because it was almost like the minimum contribution, and it was almost like the understand. Exactly, why are we doing more than that? And it seemed, and it was almost like not a good service of telling people, the minimum contribution just means that that's the minimum we have to go by the state.
Right.
And then we do, it was even called extra, I forget what it was called.
Supplement.
Yeah, and like, so it seems like we're supplementing more than we're supposed to be supplementing or something. So I think we made some type of decision
I think
that we.
the difference is that the minimum contribution was decided on the two-step method, whereas the supplemental contribution was decided on the per capita one. And
We're not putting it on.
That's
and therefore, I think from transparency, as you will see,
technically, you didn't have to vote the supplemental. I mean, we said to everyone, you said the state would require us to do the minimum.
They would take it off our cherry sheet no matter what.
Right, and now we discussed, the idea was that you are voting this money for the school, you know, and
Okay.
I don't know, I mean, I like it that way, but, you know, what you said is also valid, I mean.
Hey, Tom, when we used to do the budget before with the school, you explain that to him, Mike? We used to say like the minimum contribution, then what else did we call it?
Supplemental,
Yeah, it was minimum and supplemental.
Okay, that's
That was the terminology used.
so, and now we have it just as a one line item.
Yeah, it's one line.
Mhm.
Very good. That's how Greg presents it, right? I don't think we've done minimum and supplemental for years.
Well, a couple of years, only about a couple of years.
Okay, we got it.
All right. So estimated taxpayer impact. Selectmen called for a budget with taxpayer impact not greater than 2%. The way I arrived at that estimate is took 2% of the FY19 operating budget, it's about $307,000. Added to that projected new growth because that amount of increase can be absorbed without affecting the current taxpayer. And I took an average of the last 5 years. As you'll see in the appendices, I put in the last 10 years, and depending on which years you choose, you can get more or less than that number. But I think that's a very safe number based on the trends and based on the development that's going on.
Well, based on the development that's going on, is this going to be a up year?
Yes, it's also a reval year.
Oh, we just did.
It's the 4th year, and Tom can.
I think it is the 4th year.
Yeah. And then the other thing, which I don't believe has been done as part of prior budget processes, but that's projecting non-tax revenue, the local receipts. And so I'm projecting additional non-tax revenue of $210,000 in FY20. And
That's an addition, 210,000?
of non-tax revenue. Based on what was included,
Hold on,
well,
non-property tax revenue?
yes, yeah, excise tax, fees, licenses, permits, all of that
That's the new,
stuff.
yeah, so when you say
Correct.
tax revenue, excise tax is a tax. So you're
Yes.
saying
Right.
Non-property tax
that's
revenue.
non-property
Non,
tax.
yeah.
The growth amount, that seems high.
Anybody buying Escalades and Porsches?
No, it's all in there. But basically, the amount that's based on is FY19, where I think the number ended up being significantly low. That was put into the recap. Yeah. So some of that is.
Based on the other one was low, so this is.
That's part of it. There are also some others that are increasing. For instance, building permits, the board significantly increased fees back in August.
Right.
And so we've already seen increased revenue there.
Really?
And that's going to continue through with the development that's going on. Another big area of growth is investment income, where we have already either met or possibly, we've basically already met the year's projection of investment income because since I've been here, we've renegotiated all the interest rates on all of the large balance accounts. And so we've already seen a significant uptick in investment income.
That's good.
But yeah, the math and the trends and all of that is in there. And this is actually going to be part of the FinCom's review as part of their budget, not just the expense budget, but looking at those revenue projections to see, do they feel those are sound? I think they're sound, but that's going to be up to the FinCom. So that basically, so what that means is that the expense budget could increase by about $628,000 within a 2% estimated impact on the taxpayer. So that was therefore my target of kind of putting this all together with a not to exceed bottom line. And that's pretty much almost to the dollar what I came to in the proposed budget which would be a increase in the expense budget of $682,000. About 65% of that number, or $447,000, is what I'm referring to as known or fixed cost increases such as education, employee benefits, and contractual obligations. And that detail's all in there as well. So there's relatively little, there's some play there, but there's not a lot of play. So this is the detail sheet that Joe was asking about earlier. So this basically spells out that math. So you've got your projected new non-tax revenues, your projected new growth, and then the estimated taxpayer impact. You've got the 2% addition to last year or the current year's expense budget. Add the two numbers from above to get that bottom line, and then that's kind of the math. So
we have to come up with $647 somewhere?
no, it's actually that's the surplus. We'll enjoy at the end. So the board had also directed that the budget take into account capital planning and transfers to stabilization. So the Capital Improvements Committee has met a couple of times already this year. They tell me this is earlier in the process than they often have, so I think that's great. We've had some good discussions. They've got another meeting a week from Wednesday at 7:30, so they're really digging into that process. Their most recent table from last spring called for a $500,000 transfer to stabilization within the FY20 budget. So that's what you'll see I've listed under the initial proposed is $500,000. My proposed budget carries $439,000. That was reduced to make that bottom line. So for that to go up to $500,000 and keep the 2%, you'd need to find $61,000 elsewhere, and we'll get to.
Make sure I understand. So you've got in your budget $439,000 going into the stabilization fund. That's from taxes.
Correct.
From
raise and appropriate. Yes, correct. That is exactly correct. Yep. So.
How much was there last year?
300,000.
300,000.
Yeah.
So it's really,
it's a significant increase.
$39,000 over last year.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So. The capital planning process will go forward in parallel with a FinCom review of the expense budgets, including the CIC's review of specific FY20 capital expenditures and their overall work on the 10-year capital program, and my work on that. The current stabilization balance is $1.4 million. The Community Compact recommends 15% of the town's operating budget. That's a guide, but if you took that literally, that would be 2.4. It's just a benchmark to put that out there. So
I think that 439 is outstanding. If that's, I can't wait to look under the hood because that's huge. That's a very good job.
Mm-hmm.
It's an increase of $139,000 over last year.
I know.
How much was the non-taxable, but it's really not non-taxable, but that 210? What was the actual of that last year?
The actual, let's see, it's
No, never mind.
it's going to be in here. I have that information, but it actually I think it is in here. I think it's in the appendix. You've got the estimated and actual. So okay, yeah, this tells you. So in FY17 it was 1.25 million. In FY18 it was 1.3. The estimate in FY19 was just 1.12. So that's where some of that delta comes from. So the projection that I've made is 1.33. So that's where the delta, the 210,000 comes from. So, but all of that data is in there. So personnel organizational structure, I do have a org chart. I haven't included that. I've already given you a lot of information. That's something we'll talk about, I think at a future meeting. But one thing, this is a nuanced thing, but it actually does carry through to the bottom line more than you might think. The budgeting is based on the specific number of work days in the year, and FY20 has an extra 0.2 a week. So it's an extra 8 hours of work, for a full-time person across the organization. It's not a huge impact, but it is a little bit of an impact that you see even without COLA or anything. You see those wage numbers increase just because of how we do the budgeting. It's a very precise way of doing the budgeting, which I think is good. The proposed budget does carry a 2% COLA. As you may have noticed from the FinCom meeting schedule, the discussion of COLA and employee benefits is at their final meeting so that they can kind of reevaluate a recommendation on that. based on what they're seeing at that time as the bottom line. So they could recommend more, they could recommend less, this board could recommend more or less, but the 2% is included in the numbers that you have before you. So the cost impact of non-contractual COLA across the organization at 2% is approximately $29,000. It ends up being about $14,000 per percentage point, roughly. For likely new hires, there is some,
14 and 14 is 28.
roughly,
14.5.
14.5. There's a lot of specific numbers before you. I've used some round numbers for the presentation purposes. So there is some conservatism. This next point I'm going to make is a very important one. For areas where we know there's going to be personnel turnover, specifically the fire chief and the library director, who's retiring as of, what did I say?
You said fire chief.
Oh, sorry, police chief and library director. So we have 2 anticipated new hires. This budget assumes a family health plan for both. That's a big tax or big cost impact. If either of those end up being, an individual plan or an opt-out, that could be a difference of anywhere from $14,000 up to as much as $21,000 if someone's an opt-out. Wow. So that's some conservatism. And as you're looking at these numbers, remember that's included in this budget. We may not incur those costs. So that's an important point.
But it's good that you're budgeting for it.
I couldn't.
This is a worst case.
Yes, yes. I think that's exactly right. I do see some potential for reclassifications or changes to some non-union positions. Any such proposals would require this board's approval. So that's something that would need to be discussed separately. As you know, the highway union contract negotiations are underway. We don't know what the FY20 costs will be. So I've built in some amount to allow us to bargain in good faith without, so that's a variable. That's something that's definitely still open in the cost budget. Impact of new policies and mandates. We do have OSHA compliance. You'll see some fairly modest impacts on training and clothing budgets, but we have looked at those closely to make sure that we're going to have people in the right gear. The stormwater management, you'll see in the proposed operating budget for DPW an additional $10,000 to assist in year 2 of the permit. DEP compliance is also added to the DPW budget on the cleaning of catch basins. We are required to not only dispose of those materials, but test them. This is part of the water quality requirements. Historically, they've just been put into a pile. That is not allowed, so that's a regulatory compliance cost. There is a new Department of Conservation and Recreation mandate to create an emergency action plan for Mill Pond. That was proposed by the department head in the operating budget. I took it out and recommended we go for a warrant article instead because it's a one-time expense as opposed to the stormwater, which I think is going to be a recurring cost.
Well, is that, that's my question, is that going to be an every 3-year thing, or?
No, it's
once every 50 or something?
It's hard to know, and it's definitely DCR has definitely taken a one-size-fits-all approach. We got this letter, and it actually sounds pretty alarming. But then we started looking around, and everybody with any dam in their town got the same letter. And they only gave us till the end of this calendar year to complete this work. We have contacted a couple of prospective vendors just for preliminary budgeting purposes. But it seems like, and this is elaborated in the warrant article materials, once it's in place, we don't think it's going to impose future costs, but we do have to get it done by the end of the year.
Is it because it's breached, or is it because of global warming?
It's basically to game plan what would happen in the event of a breach, what properties or structures would be impacted, and what's the threat of loss. So, but it's not the Hoover Dam, as we know. Right. So, and adoption of community compact policies will affect some personnel responsibilities, possibly justify some extra training, but it's not going to affect total personnel hours. So one question this board asked at an earlier meeting is when I present the budget to also present what would it take to save 100,000, 200,000, some other amount? So the Pentucket budget may go down. I have used the highest number in there that they've given me. They've given me a couple of alternate numbers that are going to be hashed out there, which could save some money. That's not something we would do to save money, but that's something that could happen. We'll see.
What about Whittier?
Whittier, we haven't received, all we've been told by Whittier is to hold the, we haven't received a proposed budget
We
yet.
know what our student population is usually the driver up and down.
I don't know it off the top of my head, but Lori's spoken to them once or twice a week for the last month trying to get the budget,
Three
so.
new people.
2 or 3
Yeah.
people makes a huge difference.
That'll eat up all the.
Right, well, and the Essex, the North Shore Ag as well is, that's 19,575 for a single student. But if no one goes there, then that could be zeroed out. So there are some dynamics in there that will continue to change. FinCom has asked the Board of Health, has asked whether the Board of Health has considered transitioning to pay-as-you-throw, given the increase in recycling costs. Really, I have no reason to think that, I mean, that's not going to be looked at in a serious way this spring. Board of Health did look at it back in 2004. They did a survey. Yep.
That came from the Board of Health and not you?
That came from the Finance
I
Committee,
mean, the Finance Committee?
and not me. That's right.
I
Yep.
brought that, I have to say this. I was here, this was a long time ago. I was here for like my first 6 months in West Newbury, and I brought that up at a meeting as a suggestion because the former town that I lived in.
I'd go over. Just as well when I said to the riding and driving that they have to clean up their horse poop.
About that.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So I just want to make you aware that this, and I've certainly made the health department and the board aware that when their section comes up, I just know the FinCom will ask them about it. So Board of Health's provided me the materials from when they looked at it in '04.
I got yelled at the food mart last week that was your proposal, and I forgot to ask you about it.
No, I'm
That's
just,
the reason why I asked.
I'm just the messenger.
This new town manager telling us we're gonna have to pay this go. I'll have to inform them in the morning.
Yeah, no, I was real clear in my correspondence to the board that this was, it's just a messenger. So this may be discussed in the future. We have a contract through FY '20, so it's not anything, near term, but very clearly it's under the Board of Health jurisdiction. So some areas where relatively small amounts of money could be saved. There's the issue of the fees with the West Newbury Youth League. That's something that's going to come up in the context of the recreation budget. The review of non-union personnel vehicle stipends versus reimbursement for actual mileage. That's something we could look at more closely. And the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes, that is a significant cost. We did get a vendor proposal, and I have included a budget number based on the vendor proposal. So we might get a lower cost, but I wanted to include a conservative number there. To achieve larger savings, you would need to look at personnel and level of service, no question about it. So, estimated fund balances, this is a draft based on the proposed town meeting warrant articles, and you have this in front of you. I won't go through it in detail, but if you want to, so basically you've got the, takes into account you've got the actual balances across the top based on as of July 1. And then you've got the impact of the fall warrant articles, and then you've got the estimated impacts and the sources for both the special and the annual town meeting. Annual, some of these could move around, but basically this is the best information we have as of right now, so.
Because you did bring it up that the DLS recommended that the stabilization be as a number to pick 15% of the operating budget. Does anyone remember what their free cash recommendation was?
Yeah, it was 3 to 5%, but yeah, but 5. So I did that math. If you factor in town stabilization, so let's say all of these go forward as proposed and are voted as proposed, and after the annual, we'd have about 1.1 million. Based on the DLS recommendation, they would recommend about, I want to say it's about 800,000. Yeah, actually, I think it's closer to 7 because the delta was nearly 400,000. Now, that obviously doesn't take into account any overages or turnbacks, but
New additions to it, yeah.
well, the point is that the free cash balance is going to be roughly 400,000 above what DLS
Right.
recommends as a minimum. So that ends up being a policy discussion of whether you want to either maintain the higher balance, whether you want to, if as the budget process goes forward, if any of these numbers go up, but you want to maintain the commitment to stabilization, maybe you draw some of that from free cash, but, those are options available to the town. So.
Was it, just one question, did we put anything for the pension stabilization?
Yes, I proposed 70,000.
There's an article, yeah.
It's not changing in the. There's no number though, is it?
Yes, 70.
Oh, minus 7.
Yeah, minus 70.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, but you didn't put it in to add to the, when you put it in.
Oh, I didn't, you're right. Yep, that should be an add to that column too. And that, as you know, has been 50,000, but the DLS recommended is more like 70,000. So that's another number where there's some play. As we get into this, there are some areas where we could.
Right, I mean, this is something that we're being proactive, we're being way
Yes.
proactive.
Yeah. Yep.
But we can. Okay, next.
So next steps, the Finance Committee calendar you have in your packets that's been posted in the front office, sent around to all the department heads, boards and committee and commission chairs. They're going to meet the next 4 Tuesdays, and there's a schedule for each night of what departments they're going to be talking about. The proposed budget on the table will be the budget I've proposed. However, the initial budgets are also included in those materials to get into just the kind of discussion I talked about a few minutes ago of the FinCom saying, hey, they proposed this, you proposed that. What's the trade-off? What are we losing by doing that? Or what are we getting that wasn't in the initial proposed? Which I think is really healthy. I think that's exactly the kind of discussion that needs to happen during budget.
You probably have not met with them yet, but have they given you any feedback? Because obviously this is very compressed for what they're used to.
Has FinCom?
Yeah.
Oh, I meet with them every week.
No, but have they given you any feedback on this?
They voted that before I sent it out.
Okay.
They had reviewed that at multiple meetings before
Okay,
it was
that's
finalized. Yeah.
Yeah.
So FinCom will make its recommendations at or prior to the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, Moderator, and Town Council on March 25th. And that is what I have.
Very interesting.
So,
Any other questions?
Any questions from us? Okay, thank you, Angus.
thank you.
Nice job.
Thanks.
That's superb.
Thank you.
What do you want from us?
Well, you got a lot of detail in front of you. It was, yeah, right. Yeah, I think as you go through it, any questions, just send them my way. You don't need to wait till you have a critical mass. If you see one, just dash off a note. I want the FinCom meetings to be as responsive as possible to the questions. So the more lead time I have, both from this board, from FinCom, from departments, boards, commissions, everybody, is going to make those meetings most efficient. We are going to need to be really efficient with time, as you noted. Having 4 instead of 5 meetings, it would be great to have that 5th meeting, but
Well, they can, I know they might.
they could always find a date.
Yeah, I mean, they
So.
might squirm a little bit.
One thing
Yeah.
I would ask Laurie, if she's been talking to Whittier, if you could just ask them, I mean, I don't know about our agreement, there has to be a drop dead date that they have to give us something.
The student population as of October 1st of this last year.
Yeah, so they're gonna, so maybe if they, at least if we could get like, hey, guys, I
Mhm.
know you might not have it now, but when do you plan on getting it?
Yep. Yeah, it should,
Angus, too,
yeah.
We want to invite them, as we usually invite them to come.
Yep.
Usually, sometimes they have it and sometimes they don't at that point, yeah.
If they wanna come, they can come, but it almost seems like that.
One thing I want to say on health insurance, we had been, in the earlier draft, we'd been carrying 4%. I was able to connect with them today, and we've known for months that they were going to finalize the number on or around February 14th. So today I got the firm number for health insurance is 3.6%. So that's like unheard of. You'll see a larger increase in that line because of the conservative budgeting I talked about earlier with the new hires.
okay.
But that's what drives that. It's like 3.6%, but then you add in a couple of new family plans, and that's what drives the increase.
So what hammer's gonna fall? This just all seems like a little bit too much good news. Nothing? When we find out we have 75 kids going to Whittier? Be a sledgehammer. Okay, good, thank you very much. Excellent, good job, thank you. I'll give you a couple of minutes to. Correspondence from the Department of Housing and Community Development to extending approval for ownership home. Angus, and let's.
It's just
part of this, let's speak about managing it.
Right, so this is primarily informational. These materials all went through the board, and they were sent to DHCD. Those units have been accepted. That's great. It's not that easy to get units into the so-called local action units onto your inventory. The kicker that I've talked with Glenn about, and he had a great suggestion, the town of West Newbury is the monitoring agent for these units. That means we have an ongoing responsibility with annual certifications, and on any resale, you're talking about tenant qualification, managing a lottery process, income verification. It's quite a lot of work. We are not staffed for that. We're not resourced for that. I talked with Glenn, and he had a great suggestion of this housing trust, or it's not a housing trust, but there's the affordable housing offset. There is some money there. So I reviewed it with Mike, and preliminarily we haven't dug into it in detail, but we think that that would be an eligible pool of money. And so I'm looking into that further, but I think we'd be well served to develop a relationship with somebody who's qualified in this, so that when the need arises, that we have kind of a go-to outside resource.
Right. So we just contracted out for somebody to do, we paid out that money. It's
Right.
needy money. We paid money into the site instead of having an affordable housing down there.
Yep. But I just want to be clear, and Leah's doing the same thing with the planning board, that these things do have long-term costs, and it is not insignificant.
Because we don't have the personnel too to be able to.
Right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
But I thought Glenn's suggestion was terrific because it would allow us to absorb that without affecting the taxpayer.
Good job.
Good. Can I go back on the budget just one second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and I meant to ask you, and I looked at Tom and you reminded me. You had impacts of if the warrant article passed, right? So now we have a citizen's petition. Do we have the impact of if this passed?
On CPC revenues for FY20?
Well, not revenues, but tax, if it passed, our taxes would the surplus taxes would go down, so that would be, I think people would want to, you know what I mean, know that. So
Yeah.
if we're doing it on all the other articles, we should know what the effect of if this passes. Why do you think that?
It's not that's not on the tax rate.
Hopefully this is on. So the issue is, Glenn, is the way the citizens petition is written. If it passes at town meeting this year, it goes to a ballot vote next year. So there's a whole fiscal year lag.
So it does impact,
What about the other thing?
and obviously,
It is on the tax rate though.
no, it's on the tax bill, but it's not on the tax rate, right?
Correct.
The bill is the same as the rate. isn't it?
No. No.
Well, I know it's not, I understand it's not, but it's still the amount of money we're taking.
Oh,
from the
it's on
individual.
the bill that's mailed out. Obviously, it's less, yes.
So if it passes at town meeting, everyone will still be paying the 3% surcharge for fiscal year 2020. It will be
Until
in
it's voted.
2021. If it passes at the ballot, then there would be that impact of the budget and what people get on there.
So
That's in July 2020.
is this the town meeting in May of 2021? Which,
No, town meeting first and then ballot of next year.
I think Mr. McCarron can talk about some of the opinions from Beacon Hill in terms of how you have to now do the town meeting vote, then the ballot.
Yeah, it would be effective for the fiscal year, if it passed at town meeting, and then it passed at the annual election in 2020.
21.
Yeah, no,
Twen-
20 next year.
Oh, next year,
2020.
2020, yeah,
It
yeah,
would affect
21.
fiscal year 21.
right.
However, for the benefit of town meeting members in looking at this issue, it would probably be beneficial to project what the tax impact would be.
Yeah, of course
I mean,
it would.
yeah,
Yep.
so I mean,
Yes.
I mean, it won't happen in 2020, but it should
No,
be,
it would
should be
give them
information that the town should know.
It would give them information on what they're actually voting on.
Yes.
And the effect.
Yep, the impact, yep.
So I don't know if you're going in front of FinCom, but it would be good to know the balances, how much we've really used, and what the effect is gonna be if it passes. Okay, some of it needs to come up with that, because it'll be answered. Excuse me, it'll be answered. Okay, moving on, we're on.
L.
Project funds from the Personnel Advisory Committee Department. Did you explain?
Sure, yeah, it's just informational, this letter, you got a genericized version, but a letter went to either the department head or the chair of every board or commission that oversees personnel. Basically, the Personnel Committee, as I think you know, under the bylaw, is charged with kind of helping the town make sure that there's equity and fairness across the organization in terms of, pay structure and, similar compensation for similar type of work. The committee's met several times since they were reactivated in the fall, and in order to have a good baseline to do that kind of evaluation, they agreed that they need to have job descriptions that are current and accurate. So we've done some work on that with some targeted areas of the organization since I've been here, but this casts a much broader net to non-union personnel to invite the input from the department heads or the boards or commissions that appoint them on whether the job descriptions are complete and accurate. So they've set so they set it to you as chair of the board of selectmen, yeah. And so, yeah, Glenn got it as chair and asked me, what's this about? And so he asked me to put it on the agenda just for informational. So
that we can do it, but we have, as a board, have to.
well, we're kind of ahead of the game because this board recently did that exercise in detail and updated some job descriptions, so.
So Judy's the chairperson of the Personnel Committee again?
That's right, yep.
Okay.
The committee is looking for at least one new member. So if there's
I'm not on it.
people interested.
No selectmen are on it.
Yeah, Selectmen used to be on it, but it's kind of a conflict or whatever. Which is true,
I wouldn't say conflict, I would say it's the
Part of
selectmen,
process. If
yeah,
you're
the
gonna be evaluating at the end, you probably should be part of the process.
right.
Yeah, we
right.
agree
And
to
also,
that.
selectmen are looking at things with a universe of information and financial impacts, whereas the personnel committee is intended to really look more objectively without consideration of, all of these things, and to say, does it seem fair? And then ultimately, they're advisory to this board. So yeah, it's felt like a better process.
You follow up on the meeting assignments.
So I've got the same list from last time. I didn't have a chance to update it, so I could run down that if you'd like.
Anything new for you guys?
Night, Tom?
Anything new for you guys?
No.
You? Oh, yes. It's. Do we wanna, basically, I just wanted to know whether, we said we were gonna try to make the Memorial Day parade this year, beef it up, and, have we started that, and has the
have, do they have, are you kidding?
Who's just Joe if they have any money in their budget?
All further out.
So I can speak on that if you'd like.
No, unnecessary. They have unlimited funding. So do they do they,
No, I think you said about the parade, not the funding, right?
I'm talking about the parade, right?
oh,
If that's
To
what
go
you're
to
asking.
Archie's question.
Well-
Yes, Mary?
So yes, I have been speaking to numerous different, the churches in town. I've spoken with the Bicentennial Committee. They kind of wanted to wait till after the gala to really get involved with it. Talking about different things like beautifying some of the town properties, like the Old Town Hall, putting up some buntings and things like that. That's where the ceremony takes place. And but and I've spoken with almost all of the groups that take part in the parade every year. What I have not done is tried to get any additional music. And I was, there's that balance we've got to maintain. This is Memorial Day. This is out of respect for our veterans. I don't want to blow it up into something that is disrespectful in any way. So there's that balance that needs to be maintained. And if you have any ideas, I'd be more than willing to listen.
that's,
Maybe there are some like, military bands that would be willing to attend, or
The person over next to it, what's her name? Maybe you could ask her. Woman that helped us out before.
Oh, yeah.
right.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah, the Veterans Day, and maybe we could ask her.
but there are all,
She helped us out before.
the Air Force has a band, lots of the services have bands and locally, and maybe we just sort of have to figure out how to get in touch with them. I don't know how you do that, but.
Right. That's something that needs to be done.
What about, one year what about having, somebody that would've been 200 years old that served, and having that person would have been 200 years old, and served as Bob James, and maybe like, make them the honor, and then we research and we talk about that individual.
I think it's a great idea. I've been involved with Memorial
Somebody
Days.
that would have been 200 years old that had served in some capacity that we find out Bob James would know, and then we would, maybe do a little speech about that, him or her, hopefully him back then.
Mm-hmm.
The Pick Art Foundation is working with high school students and our representatives, and they're putting together, they want to put together a float that's going to be visual art, music, and theater. I don't think it will be disrespectful, but it will probably be boisterous. But just to be in the parade.
Yeah.
An art-centered float, but
Yeah.
not a flatbed, so what they're talking.
Right.
So should we have them contact you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. No, you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Nothing? I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Thank you, Emmanuel.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you and good night.